You know what's funny, right? Most people who start in AI automation usually start on a low-code platform like make.com. I mean, it is quite intuitive and it's a good entry point for someone who's getting into the space. And when they see tools like n8n, they might be hesitant to make the switch into a different type of automation platform. Maybe because they don't think their skills will transfer, or just maybe the hassle of just trying to take all your information and automations from make.com into n8n. That used to be exactly me. I used to think those exact things until I actually learned n8n and discovered the secrets which made my transition from make.com into n8n almost seamless. So today I'm sharing the exact systems which I used to hop over from make.com into something like n8n, which is just a lot more powerful than make.com and allows you to just do a lot more in a lot less time and at a cheaper cost. Let me show you something real quick. So this is an n8n automation which I created just to repurpose content and post it on different platforms like YouTube, LinkedIn, Instagram, whatnot. And this is the exact same flow but in make.com, split across two different scenarios. The operations which it requires is a lot greater than what it would cost in something like n8n. And that's just the beginning of where n8n trumps make.com. So someone coming from make.com, I just want to highlight that you already have the foundations and the capabilities to make the exact same automations in n8n. Let's just look at the key differences real quick and just basically highlight how that can help you port over from make.com into something like n8n. So in n8n, there's not as many integrations that you would have in something like make.com. You had to use an HTTP request to get the same Instagram post, whereas in make.com you have a natively built module here for Instagram which you can use freely. So this is beneficial for people who are just starting out in AI automation. But if you've been using make.com, you should be comfortable using HTTP requests, and it's not that big of a deal to transfer that skill. So even though n8n might not have the integrations that make.com has, you can still get the same functionality just with a few extra steps. But those few extra steps don't even compare to the wealth of extra things that you can get in n8n which are not in make. So if we head over back to n8n, this is one thing which I want to highlight, and that's the ability to use shortcuts. And there's this one shortcut which I'll show you that will basically change the game for someone coming from make.com. So you can use many different shortcuts. You can use things like tab, zoom out, you can just even zoom in, like these different things which you can do. You can tidy up, you can refresh the workspace, and there's just many things which you can do from shortcuts which are not native in make.com. Let me now show you the most important shortcut of all shortcuts in n8n, and this shortcut for anyone coming from make literally changes the game, and that is the pin shortcut or the pin feature that's native to n8n here. So in n8n, you basically have this ability to pin data from previous executions. So this is one of my automations which I use to help me with repurposing content. So in my building of this scenario, I had to do a lot of finagling with the different APIs. Finagling is an interesting word. But just basically trying to understand the APIs. So I was busy working with Clap. And with Clap, you have to upload your video and it transforms it into short forms. But that's not the point of this here. I'm trying to show you that when you click this and you click pin, this information from this HTTP request is saved. So you can basically test the workflow and don't have to keep pinging the same API. So that means you can reuse the data that you got from the HTTP request, meaning that it's a lower cost for you. And you can even edit the data which you get from an HTTP request, and that's not something you can natively do in make.com. You would have to basically use a set variable module after an HTTP request, and you have to rerun it. So that information which you got is basically gone, and you cannot reuse it to test out the workflow or finish your developments. And you can just basically change anything here to simulate what would happen if you were to change a variable. And that just allows you to do so much more in such little time and at half the cost of what it would be in make.com. In make.com, to retest and to really just get the best out of your workflows, you would have to keep rerunning, and you waste half your operations on tests instead of actual live automations. That's just the most powerful thing, I believe, coming from make.com into n8n, is the ability to pin data and to reuse the data which you get from things like APIs. And it doesn't stop at APIs. You can do it for the whole automation if you wanted to. If I come here and I just highlight this and I pin all of it, all of it's pinned, and when I test this workflow, it'll go from where I pinned up until the next point. So that's just the key difference in n8n. And now for the next feature that anyone coming from make.com should know about n8n to enhance their workflows and their productivity when they're creating automations is the built-in JavaScript functions that are in n8n. And now let's just quickly break down what's happening here and how it will benefit you in creating workflows faster and more efficiently. So here we're using the JavaScript functions. So here we get previous information from the node before this one. And we're using JavaScript functions to parse the data in a way which would take either a ChatGPT step in make.com, meaning tokens, meaning you're spending more money. And we're doing this in one step, whereas in make.com, you might have to connect two different modules together. And that just means more operations, meaning more expensive development and more expensive automations. So here we're using these functions, right? We're using the split function, which basically splits it from a specified character in the string. So in the string we've got, you can see this downwards arrow, and we're splitting it up, and that just basically creates an array, and then we index that array at position 1, and then we split it up again because this is an Airtable record, and the Airtable API expects a linked record to be in an array. So you can see that n8n just allows you to get really granular about what you do with the data and the information which you're passing around between nodes. And in the next one, we're even slicing from different positions in the string, and we're slicing again as well here, and that just basically gives us clean cut sections which you can use in different subsequent nodes. So we've got the summary, script framework, hook enhancements, and all of that stuff. So that's just another fundamental aspect that anyone coming from make.com should know about n8n. Now let's talk about the, sorry to be cliche, elephant in the room, the costs. In make.com, this is just my month of testing so far. I've racked up 1,500 operations, and data transfer is not that bad. And I've been using make.com and n8n quite equally, right? In make.com, we've got 1,575 operations of the 10,000 on the starter plan. Whereas in something like n8n, I've been testing the exact same amount, probably even more, because my scenarios in n8n have many different triggers in them. Also something you cannot do in make that n8n has, but you get the point. But I've only gotten 20 of 1,000 operations on my free trial. So as you can see, this is actually quite cost effective, and this is on the cloud hosting. So if you were to compare it to self-hosted, you could be doing thousands of operations, thousands of executions. So this is something I just want to highlight quickly. So this scenario cost 3 operations. It went from the Airtable to the HTTP request to the YouTube upload. That's 3 operations. Whereas the exact same thing in n8n would cost 1 operation, because n8n looks at the entirety of a workflow, and when it ends, that's when it counts towards your quota for the month. Whereas make, it's when one single module actually activates, counts towards your quota. Then let me not even get onto self-hosting, because self-hosting just becomes infinitely scalable from there. So that is the key difference between make.com and n8n. And that's just something very important that will help you make the transition from make into n8n. So that is why I'm in the process now, porting this whole system into n8n to 1, become a better developer, where if you can produce the same amount of output for a cheaper cost, that just means you're a better developer and AI automation solutionist. And basically you're creating the same piece of content for less for your clients. That's just a win-win for everyone. So with all of that being said, how do you make the decision to switch from something like make.com to n8n? There's a bit of nuance there. Firstly, I don't just recommend that you choose one or the other. I recommend that you use both, right? There are some workflows which are very simple, which you can make in make.com for like within 5 minutes, and at a fraction of the operations. That might cost like 4 operations, 3 operations every single run. Not a big stress. But for the more complicated workflows where you're creating very complicated things like automated blogs, which do SEO keyword research like I did in make.com initially before I started n8n, it's probably best to do the complex things in n8n, because once you start spending on those operations in make.com, it just becomes very unsustainable to do at scale. And the exact same thing will be cheaper in n8n. So it just comes down to your project scope, your budget, of course, and your ability to use the tools. But with that now, you now know how to go from make.com and use some of the native functions which are in n8n, like the JavaScript functions and the data pinning ability. So with that information, I now think you should be equipped to make the best decision for your AI agency or for your business. So yeah, see you in the next video. I'll probably be making more videos on n8n, and thanks for watching.